Curious Lloyd.
The days are gone when humanity believed our fate was dictated by a group of gods living atop a holy mountain, or that women who wanted to vote were definitely witches, or that hard work can make all of our hopes and dreams come true. We now know better. But while we're fairly certain that the perfectly timed thunderstorm outside our window is not in fact the mocking laughter of Thor, that doesn't mean the scientific explanation behind it is any less weird. Cyclopses are caused by toxic flowers. You've most likely seen this video of this cyclops goat making its rounds. Having been born in India, where virtually everything is in some way divine, people naturally flock to this creature to receive blessings of good luck or to at least take a selfie with the demigod. But sadly, the so-called miracle goat died after a couple of weeks because unlike governments, Mother Nature is pretty efficient at mopping up her horrific mistakes. But it definitely gets weirder. Shortly after World War II, Idaho sheep ranchers experienced a decade-long plague of lambs which, like the miracle goat, looked like they'd been drawn by Ray Harryhausen. It took 11 years and a string of US Department of Agricultural researchers before one scientist, Lynn James, finally figured out that the mutations in question were not caused by nearby nuclear testing, but were in fact all thanks to some flowers. Corn lilies, to be precise. Now you see, during the dry summer season, female sheep would migrate to higher ground and eat these tasty toxic flowers. The poisonous blooms didn't harm the adult sheep, but they did attack the genes of their unborn babies, causing a typically fatal birth defect known as cyclopia. Fetuses suffering from this mutation ended up with half the brain hemispheres of a normal developed mammal, as well as half the eyes. This really happens to humans too, by the way. I wouldn't recommend looking it up either. But today, the sneaky toxin present in corn lilies is known as cyclopamine, while the misfiring gene responsible for cyclopia. It was identified by Harvard researcher Cliff Tabin in the early 90s. The angel's glow was caused by a bioluminescent bacterium. The Civil War's Battle of Shiloh left more than 23,000 casualties on the banks of the Tennessee River. As legend has it, some of the soldiers' wounds began to glow an eerie blue, and somehow, after waiting 2 full days in the cold, wet April weather for medics to arrive, the soldiers with glowing wounds seemed more likely to survive. Obviously, a higher power was at work here. That's probably why the mysterious blue light came to be known as Angel's Glow. In 2001, 17-year-old high school student Bill Martin was visiting the Shiloh battlefield when he heard a far-fetched tale of glow-in-the-dark wounds. So Martin asked his mum about the story, because in addition to being his mum and therefore aware to all knowledge both great and small, Phyllis Martin was a microbiologist. Furthermore, she was a microbiologist who had been studying photohabdus luminescens, a bioluminescent bacteria that glows an eerie blue. Martin's mum tasked him with testing his hypothesis himself, so he and a friend did exactly that and discovered that P. luminescens was most likely present at the Battle of Shiloh. There was just one problem though. The bacteria doesn't normally survive at human body temperature, but lower the human's body's temperature by, say, floundering for 2 entire days in the cold April rain, and suddenly you have the perfect conditions for the critters to flourish in the sea of gaping wounds. And since this particular bacteria gives off chemicals that murder other nastier microorganisms, soldiers who experienced this so-called angel's glow would have indeed had a better chance of starving off the infection. So yes, I would describe P. luminescens as very angel-like. Some UFO sightings are airborne spiders. In Florence, Italy, on October the 27th, 1954, everyone at Stadio Artemo Franchi gathered to watch a rousing game of wrong football. Everyone fell silent and looked up to the sky. Ardigo Magnini, a 1954 World Cup player, describes what they saw. I remember everything from A to Z. It was something that looked like an egg that was moving slowly, but slowly. Everyone was looking up, and also there was some glitter coming down from the sky. Silver glitter. Like the movies, the skies above Tuscany had been infested with otherworldly invaders, but in fact, it was flying spiders. The wispy silvery substance that fell in the wake of the UFOs didn't just land on the football stadium, but it also fell on rooftops and lawns throughout Tuscany, commonly referred as angel hair by UFO conspiracy tapes. This fragile sticky substance has been described as similar to cotton wool, or wait for it, cobwebs, and as it so happens, the time frame of the 1954 UFO sightings falls right at the tail end of the magnificent spider migration that takes place in the Northern Hemisphere each year. Retired USAF pilot and current astronomer James McGaha describes these migrations as follows. The spiders use these webs as sails, and they link together and you get one big glob of the stuff in the sky, and the spiders ride on this to move between locations. They just fly on the wind, and these things have been recorded at 14,000 feet above the ground. So when the sunlight glistens off this, you get all kinds of visual effects, and some of this stuff breaks off and falls to the ground. This all seems magical, of course, but I'm fairly confident that's what happened that day. It turns out that the cryptic mystery blocks on the UK beaches were not all that mysterious. While out walking her dog on a Cornwall beach in 2012, Tracy Williams spotted a big black tablet lying in the sand. She turned over the tablet to find a single, seamlessly nonsense word, Tigipatire. I think that's how you pronounce it. Anyway, she didn't think much of it until weeks later when she found a matching slab on yet another beach. Williams set up a Facebook page in an attempt to solve the mystery, and reports soon flooded in of perplexing rubber blocks discovered on beaches from France to Sweden. It didn't take long to connect the name, Tigipatire, to an Indonesian plantation that, around the turn of the 20th century, was a major producer of gutta percha, the old-timey vegan equivalent of the present-day plastic. So that answered the question of where the blocks originated. But how exactly did these mysterious prehistoric objects end up scattered all across the beaches of Northern Europe? Well, a French newspaper speculated that the blocks were washing up from the wreckage of the Titanic, which listed gutta percha on its manifest. But then, a much stronger candidate came to light in 2013. The Japanese cargo liner Miyazaki Maru, which was sunk west of the Scilly Isles in 1915 by German U-boat ace Walter Schwieger, who also took out the Lusitania. Not only was the ship carrying blocks of gutta percha, but it was also being ripped to bits by salvagers, even as untold rubber blocks were finding their way into the ocean currents. The Miyazaki Maru was carrying such a massive load of gutta percha. In fact, the discovery of blocks isn't likely going to stop anytime soon. Oceanographer Curtis Abesmia estimates that the blocks are one of the great pieces of flotsam that people may be finding 100 years from now, or people will forget about this story in due time, and the mystery will begin anew. The Blue people of Kentucky were intimate with other Blue people. The Blue Fugates of Troublesome Creek were, as their nickname implies, blue. When Martin Fugate immigrated to Kentucky from France in 1820, the most likely explanation from his blue skin was probably from pissing off a witch. But we know a simpler explanation now though. Fugate suffers from a rare blood disorder known as methemoglobinemia, passed down through a recessive gene. This disorder renders the blood, which enables to carry an adequate amount of oxygen, thereby tinting the subject's skin a lovely shade of blue. Now the thing about recessive genes is that it takes two of them to tango, so can you see where this is heading? Benji Stacy was born as blue as Lake Louise, and could trace his ancestry directly back to Martin Fugate. So having lived in a remote area of Kentucky, which was largely disconnected from the outside world, the Fugates really kept it in the family, so to speak. Cousins married cousins. Martin's son Zachary grabbed the trend by marrying his own aunt and popped out some new blue self cousins to keep the grand tradition going. So the Fugates danced the Targaryen shuffle for 7 generations before the coal mining found its way to the region and forcibly expanded their world. The family then dispersed and the recessive trait became less common. That's not to say it disappeared entirely. However, Kerry Green, a 53-year-old Tulsa native and a methemoglobinemia sufferer, strongly suspects that his absentee father was descendant from the Tennessee branch of the Fugate family tree. Though he suffered a long chain of health problems, starting with a series of heart surgeries shortly after birth, his condition isn't all downside. Green claims his father was once shot 5 times, yet he didn't bleed out, because the disorder makes your blood the consistency of melted chocolate, which sounds like something you'd see in a Marvel film.